Welcome to The Explainer, where we break down big topics one slide at a time. Today, we're going to talk about something wild, the most ferocious winter storms in American history. We all love the idea of a snow day, right? It seems so peaceful. But history tells a very, very different story. Winter storms can be some of the most destructive forces out there, changing cities and lives forever. So, what really makes a storm one for the history books? Well, it's not just about how much snow gets dumped. It's about its raw power, the chaos it causes, and the tough lessons we're forced to learn in the aftermath. All right, so let's get into it. First things first, what are we even talking about when we say the word blizzard? Okay, so this is super important. A blizzard isn't just a ton of snow. Nope, it's all about the wind. We're talking sustained, howling winds that whip that snow around, creating whiteout conditions and massive drifts. That combination, that's the deadly combo. So let's start way back in a time when these monster blizzards could just pop up out of nowhere, leaving entire cities totally buried and completely helpless. So picture this. March 1888. A storm hits the East Coast that people started calling the Great White Hurricane. And for good reason. It buried cities under these insane 50-foot snowdrifts. I mean, can you even imagine? Yeah, this was way more than just a storm. It was a total breakdown of society. With over 400 people dead, it went down as the deadliest winter storm in U.S. history. It was a brutal wake-up call, showing just how vulnerable everything was back then. And out of all that chaos came this wild, radical idea. To make sure the city never got paralyzed like that again, they decided to go underground. Yep, this is what kickstarted the first subway systems in Boston and New York. Okay, let's jump forward a few decades to another tragic storm. This one's remembered for a really, really grim reason. It hit Washington, D.C. with a record-breaking 28 inches of super heavy, wet snow. 98. That's how many people died in this one storm in the nation's capital. But here's the heartbreaking part. They didn't freeze. They weren't lost in the snow. No, what happened was something nobody saw coming. It was all because of a roof. The sheer weight of all that heavy, wet snow was just too much for the flat roof of the Knickerbocker Theater, and it came crashing down, right in the middle of a movie. That one disaster is how the storm got its name, a really tough lesson in engineering. All right, now we're getting into the mid-20th century. And the problem with blizzards starts to change. It's less about pure survival and more about how to stop a massive, modern city from grinding to a halt. So check this out. In 1967, Chicago got hit hard. The forecast? Oh, just a few inches of snow. No big deal, right? Wrong. What they actually got was nearly 2 feet of snow in 24 hours. It just goes to show, even with modern tech, a forecast can go spectacularly wrong. And the city just stopped. I mean, totally frozen in place. You had 50,000 cars just left on the roads, buses stranded, O'Hare Airport shut down. They had to use helicopters just to get medicine to hospitals. It was a complete shutdown. Okay, so now we're in the modern age of meteorology. We're talking satellites, computer models. We can see these monster storms coming from days away. But here's the twist. Just because we can see them doesn't mean we can stop them. And their sheer size creates a whole new set of problems. A perfect example is the storm of the century back in 1993. This thing was a beast. And thanks to computer models, the National Weather Service saw it coming. They issued a huge warning 2 full days in advance. Governors were actually declaring states of emergency before a single snowflake had even fallen. And what made this storm so crazy was its variety. This wasn't just a blizzard. Oh no, it was this massive weather bomb that stretched from Canada all the way down to Central America. It had everything: hurricane-force winds, tornadoes in Florida, coastal flooding, and yeah, mountains of snow up north. It was the whole shebang. And the cost? Just mind-boggling. If you adjust for today's dollars, we're talking about almost $10 billion in damage. $10 billion. It was one of the single most expensive weather events of the entire 20th century. But here's the really sobering part. 318 people lost their lives. And that just proves a really tough point. Even when you have a perfect forecast, even when you have days to get ready, A storm this powerful is still going to be overwhelming. And it's not just a thing of the past. Think about Winter Storm Jonas in 2016. We had days of warning, everyone knew it was coming, and still over 50 people died. It just shows that even when we're totally prepared, these storms are still incredibly dangerous. So when you look at all these stories together, you start to see a pattern, right? Our whole relationship with these storms has been this long journey, from being totally caught off guard to figuring out how to defend ourselves. Yeah, this timeline kind of says it all. You start in 1888 with no warning, total paralysis. Then you jump to 1967, we've got forecasts, but they can be dead wrong. And then by 1993, we can see the monster coming. The problem isn't predicting it anymore. It's managing a catastrophe that you know is on its way. You know, every single one of these historic blizzards left its mark. They forced us to change, to get smarter. From literally digging subways to get away from the snow, to getting resources in place days ahead of time, we've learned to adapt. Every storm was a tough lesson. Which leaves us with a pretty big question, right? With storms this powerful, does all our modern forecasting tech really make us safer? Or does it just give us a better view of something we can't stop? It really makes you think about our place in the face of nature's power. Thanks for joining us for this explainer.